Good afternoon, everyone. Now, yesterday we had stopped while we were discussing about Napoleon. So, yesterday we were discussing about Napoleon and the factors which facilitated the rise of Napoleon, and also how Napoleon's policy themselves were beset with a number of contradictions. Though he was a strong authoritarian ruler who did protect the French Revolution from a number of outside invasions, he himself undermined some of the very ideals of the French Revolution during the period of his rule. And you see that France was beset with a number of wars during the Napoleonic years, as they are called, from the 1790s till the eventual final overthrow of Napoleon in 1814. And you see the Congress of Vienna happening in 1850. Okay. Now, yesterday talking about the Congress of Vienna, I told you that the main objective with which the Congress of Vienna was formed was to establish stability between states and stability within states. And for both of this, you see, to achieve these overall purposes, the whole idea and the overall objective was to return France back to a pre 1789 and Europe back to a pre 1789 position. And for this, a number of steps were taken inspired by the principles of reinstating the monarchical powers or those who had the legitimate right to rule or the principle of legitimacy, right, or the principle of legitimate rule. And the legitimate rule was not one which was elected by the people or gave people any role in the election or in appointing a ruler. Rather, the legitimate rule belonged to those who had a divine right to rule, and that was the monarchy, right? So you see the principle of legitimacy was one of them. The principle of ensuring that France does not become overtly way more powerful than its other neighbors, which allows it to follow an aggressive path towards its neighbors. Or the idea was also to restore the balance of power in Europe and to ensure that France is not overly or the territorial, military, and financial strength of the French Empire is not much more than that of its neighbors. And so the principle of balance of powers. Also, given the fact that France, that in dealing with Napoleon, countries or empires like that of Russia, Austria, etc., had bared the major brunt of the French aggression and played an important role in actually defeating Napoleon. Thus, after the defeat of Napoleon, these victorious powers, which had played a key role in defeating Napoleon, were also to make benefits in terms of acquiring areas which had been so-called liberated by Napoleon. So the principle of rewarding victorious powers. Okay. So all these things we talked about in brief. Now, before we go any further, we actually should see a map, and that will provide us with a better understanding of the Congress of Vienna. And that is a map which compares, I think it will be visible in this. That is a map which compares, which compares Europe during Napoleon period and with Europe during the post-Napoleonic periods. Okay. So there's a problem here, it won't open, so probably open it here. Just a second. Any doubts from yesterday? So, I mean, having a look at this map is important primarily because of the reason that what we see in the Congress of Vienna is actually an issue of redistribution of territories which were captured by Napoleon or which was taken away by Napoleon from the monarchies. Okay, so if you see in the first portion of the map, the area that you see in blue, right? That's the reach of the French Empire. Now, the French Empire is beyond France, even into Spain. That's one of the reason that this area which is in dark blue is what was already France, and this area in light blue is the area in which Napoleon expands. Okay, so basically, the French Empire already was an important power when Napoleon came into power, and by far was the biggest one apart from Britain in Europe. And you see that the expansion of the French Empire witnesses a even more drastic period during Napoleon's reign. This area, which is Spain broadly, a number of these Italian territories, which was later to become Italy. This is what is later becoming Italy. Okay, these areas were captured by Napoleon. Also, this is where you see the pink one is what is Prussia, and there is Austria. These Prussian and Austrian territories were also reduced to a very small limit. And again, you see, this is what is called later as the Rhine region. The Rhine River flows through between France and Germany today, and the territories adjoining the Rhine River were populated by the German-speaking population. This area was called as Rhineland, and later it became a part of Germany. But here, predominantly, the German-speaking peoples used to reside. And you see that even this area was under Napoleon's control till Napoleon was there. Also, the region of what was later to become Poland, okay? Even parts of that, not completely, but parts of that were under Napoleon's control. So you see that Napoleon, except Prussia, Austria, and Russia, a large parts of what were to be Germany later, a large parts of what were to be Italy later, a large part of what was to be Spain, or what was Spain, you see, were captured by Napoleon. Now, once Napoleon is defeated, I told you that one of the first principles was to take away all the territories that Napoleon had captured, okay, since he came to power. So all these ones in black, you know, were the ones that were taken away from Napoleon, and they were to be redistributed amongst the other players. Okay, and France was to be reduced to a pre-1789 position. And that is where you see that Spain is taken back, and you see, I told you that once Napoleon was overthrown, here, once Napoleon was overthrown, the Bourbon dynasty was replaced or reinstated. And even in Spain, as well as in Naples, Naples is the posterior, or in fact, is the southernmost tip of Italy. Okay, so basically, both in Spain and in Naples, the Bourbon dynasty was reinstated. The whole Rhine region that you see here was given to Prussia. Prussia was given the control of the Rhine region. If you will go back and see in the PPT, the resolution here is not that great, but I'm telling you that the Rhine region was given back to Prussia. Now, what was Austria given? Austria was given the control of the northern Italian Austria, and we'll see that later why in the, I'll tell you later in the conference, what is happening in the Vienna, Congress of Vienna. You see these northern states, which were also actually under Napoleon's control. These northern Italian states, which were under Napoleon's control, they were given to Austria. So the northern Italian states, there are two northern Italian states that we are going to talk about. They are Lombardy and Venetia. Lombardy and Venetia were given to Austria. Rhine region was given to Prussia. And you see, even the Polish region was distributed. One-fifth was given to Prussia, and 4/5 almost. Or you see that majority of the Polish region was given to Russia, and a part of the Polish region was also given to, a part of the Polish region was also given to Prussia. Okay, so Prussia was given the Rhine region, Prussia was given a part of Poland. Okay, and Austria is being given Lombardia and Venetia. And I told you that Prussia is a German-speaking area. Austria also has a portion of the German-speaking population. Rhine is a German-speaking area. Okay, so all these regions, Prussia, Austria, the Rhine region, were converted into a loose German confederation. And basically, this German confederation, if you remember, I told you when we were discussing the, the Mughals, also that what is a confederal state? A confederal state is a very, very loose center, right? And not equal power of center in states, but the states have more power. So the confederacy that was sought to be established here of all German-speaking areas together was sought to be established under Austrian leadership. Okay. I'll explain these points later, but I'm just giving you one orientation with the map, so that when we discuss later, you should know which regions we are talking and writing about. Now, what is happening in the Congress of Vienna? What is happening in the Congress of Vienna is that in the Congress of Vienna, the Quadruple Alliance, or basically the four major victorious powers, Vienna, Prussia, Russia, and Austria. These Vienna, Prussia, Russia, Austria, and Britain. These were the four winning powers, and they were the ones to make the most of the Congress of Vienna. And France also was invited to the Congress of Vienna. Now, Metternich, who is the ruler in Austria, he is the crown prince of Austria at this point of time. Metternich is by far the most powerful player amongst in this Congress of Vienna. In fact, Metternich, who is the Austrian prince at this point of time, played an important role in the defeat of Napoleon in the Fourth Coalition, in the Fourth European Coalition that we talked about. That was the reason that Austria had a significant role to play. Also, in continental Europe, if you see in territorial extent also, after France, in continental Europe, if there was a power then which was powerful enough, then that was Austria. So Austria had a very important role in these negotiations and in the framing of terms of these negotiations. Okay, and you see that right from the first European coalition, Austria was trying to overthrow, the Republic or the French Revolution, right? Or the leaders of the French Revolution. Now, what does Austria? Firstly, the first aim is to, reinstate monarchies. And so monarchies are reinstated everywhere. We'll see that in France, in Spain, as well as in Naples and Sicily, the Bourbon dynasty is reinstated. In Rome, Rome was a city-state which was under the Pope. And this is what was the seat of the Holy Roman Empire, as it was called. And the rule of the church was abolished in Rome by Napoleon. Okay, and this was reinstated by this Congress of Vienna. Okay, also wherever Napoleon had tried to upstage the monarchies, they were reinstated. For example, north of France are two small regions. One is Belgium, and other is Holland. Okay, so in Holland, Belgium and Holland, basically we'll see that in Holland they were the erstwhile monarchy in Holland was the House of Orange, and the House of Orange was again overthrown by Napoleon, which was reinstated by the Congress of Vienna. So we, from an examination point of view, need to know only a few examples. We don't need to know that which all princely states were removed by Napoleon and which all were reinstated. Just the more prominent ones we need to remember. Now, another aim of the Congress of Vienna was also to actually prevent the rise of nationalistic impulses. Now, Napoleon had been arguing what? That all linguistically common people should actually come together to form one state. But that was not the desire of Austria or Prussia, because Austria, for example, at this point of time, was a multilinguistic and a multiracial empire. It was not an empire which just had one people belonging to one race or speaking one common language. Austria, for example, had the German-speaking population. It also had a number of other Serbian as well as Bosnians and people of different races as well as different language, who spoke a different language were a part of Austria. So Austria was not a single linguistic state. I mean, that is why I told you, even if you would remember, the Europeans could never understand the way European states were organized since 1800s. It was organized on the idea that one state would have one common language. Okay, and that is why dealing with the imagination of a country like India, which was a multilinguistic, multiracial, multi-religious society, was very different for Europe. Very difficult for Europe, because the idea of their nation states was based upon the idea of linguistic homogeneity, and also there is not much religious differences here at this point of time, that it's predominantly the Christian religion. Yes, there are differences in terms of Catholics and Protestants here also, but not to the kind of, or not the kind of diversity that you see in the Indian subcontinent. So for them, understanding the idea of a nation which was not based on a single language or single race was very difficult. Okay. For example, the Germans kept talking about their superior race later when Hitler came. Okay. Or the unification of Germany was based on the premise, and the formation of Germany later is based on the premise that all German-speaking areas must be united in one common country. Okay. So what you see is that these these nationalistic impulses on the lines of common linguistic homogeneity had been unleashed by Napoleon, but the Congress of Vienna aimed to undo it. Okay. And that is why all the Italian-speaking areas were never given to one power. In fact, Lombardy and Venetia, which were the northern Italian-speaking states, were given to Austria as a result of its key role, as a recognition of its key role in the defeat of Napoleon. And you see the other Italian-speaking states, that of Naples and Sicily, is being given to the Bourbon dynasty back, not to one common center. And so you see, and also Piedmont and Sardinia, that's something that we had talked about before, was a separate independent state of its own. So you see that Italian-speaking areas were given to three different major powers, okay, not to one common power. Similarly, German-speaking areas were there in Prussia, they were there in Austria, and you see that these German-speaking areas in Prussia and Austria were also not united, because the monarchy of Prussia would not give up its powers there, and the monarchy of Austria would not give up its powers or control over the German-speaking areas that it had under the control. So one of the intentions also was to prevent or to undo these nationalistic impulses, which was in favor of uniting all linguistically homogeneous regions together in one common state. Okay. However, Austria, and given the fact that Metternich played a very important role, Metternich was, and the period from 1815 that you see after this to 1848 is also called the age of Metternich in Europe. Just like we say that Napoleon's period from 1799 to 1815 is the Napoleonic Europe, where Napoleon played a very important role in shaping and reshaping Europe. Similarly, we say that from 1815 to 1848, the key architect of Europe was von Metternich, who was the Austrian king. And this is why this is also called as the period of this is also called as the Metternich years of Europe. So Metternich was very keen that in this Congress of Vienna, Austria must make the maximum gains. And so he announces that all German-speaking areas will be together in a loose confederation, which will be a confederation of 39 big and small German-speaking areas. Now, Napoleon in 1806 had actually laid the first step in the formation of this confederation. In fact, the Rhine region that we talked about, it was composed of a number of big and small German-speaking areas, and together German-speaking areas were almost 300 big and large princely states. And Metternich and Napoleon had converted these 300 into 39. Now, though the Congress of Vienna undid a lot of things done by Napoleon, the Congress of Vienna did not undo the consolidation of German-speaking areas together from 300 princely states into 39. And Metternich simply declared Austria to be the leader of this German confederacy. And the period from 1815 to 1848 is the period of Austrian domination in Europe and Metternich's domination over Austria. That is why these are called the Metternich years. Now, if we say that the aim of the Congress of Vienna was to undo, the French Revolution, to what extent did the Congress of Vienna succeed in doing this? And if one of the aims was to undo the French Revolution, the other aim was to bring peace and stability to Europe. Now, when it comes to the question of bringing peace and stability to Europe, if you see that there is no major European war for the next 100 years. There are I'm saying no major European war. There are wars after this also. But the kind of war that was seen in Napoleon's period, which involved the whole Europe at one time, was not seen for the next 100 years till the breakout of World War I. Okay, so World War I in 1915 is only when you see that after 99 years, you see the breakout of another major European war. So it is often argued that the Congress of Vienna was relatively successful in achieving one of the aims, and that was to bring peace and stability in Europe. Okay. However, when it comes to the aim of undoing the ideas of the French Revolution, it is often argued that the Congress of Vienna was not completely successful. Why? Because the Congress of Vienna aimed to reinstate monarchies. But monarchies were overthrown in Europe, and the nationalistic ideas and the ideas of French Revolution were replicated not just in France, but throughout Europe. When you see that after 1815, in 1848, there is a popular revolution in Austria, which overthrew the Austrian king, Metternich. Metternich, who was the architect of the Congress of Vienna to reinstate monarchies across Europe, himself was overthrown almost roughly 30 years later with a popular uprising in Austria, which overthrew him in 1848. And Austria went in the direction away from that Metternich had wished for Austria as well as Europe. So even the main architect of the Congress of Vienna was overthrown roughly 3 decades later. Okay. But if that was the aim, also France, you see, also underwent a number of revolutions from time to time, where the Bourbon dynasty was overthrown in 1830. And you see that once the Bourbon dynasty was overthrown, the rule of Napoleon's descendants was reinstated. So that is why we say that France kept alternating between the Bourbon dynasty and the Napoleonic rule from 1815 onwards till 1871. In 1830, you see, and then in 1848, you again see there is another popular rebellion. At the time when the popular rebellion broke out in Austria, the same time a popular rebellion also broke out in France. Similarly, in 1871, another popular rebellion broke out in France, which ultimately saw the overthrow of Napoleon III. Okay, Napoleon I, II, and finally there comes Napoleon III. And finally Napoleon III is overthrown in 1871, and finally France also becomes a republic. So you see that France is becoming a republic, and the ideas that were unleashed during the period of Napoleon finally result in the overthrow of monarchy in France also. Metternich was overthrown in Austria. And you also see that the aim of the Congress of Vienna was to prevent this emergence of nationalistic impulses on the lines of linguistic homogeneity. And even this could not be prevented by the Congress of Vienna, because in 1871, you see the unification of all German-speaking areas led by Prussia, and you see Germany is formed in 1871. Similarly, the unification of all Italian-speaking areas was also pursued by Piedmont and Sardinia, and you see that even Italy is formed as a new and a fresh state in 1870-71. So you see the formation of Germany, the formation of Italy, the overthrow of Metternich, and the overthrow of the Napoleon III in France were all a reflection that the Congress of Vienna could not completely undo the ideas of the French Revolution. So that is why, I mean, if you see in history, it is often That is why in history it is often argued that once ideas also have a life of their own, and once unleashed, it is not very simple, or it's not possible to simply revert back these ideas to as if they never happened. Okay, so ideas have also a life of their own is often argued, and one of these examples is these ideas of the French Revolution. Though there was a concerted attempt across Europe to undo these ideas of the French Revolution. But you see, whether it was the American Revolution or the Napoleon or the period of the French Revolution for a good 20 years after 1790 to 1815, there had been a wider consensus amongst social movements in Europe that there is no legitimacy to the idea that monarchies are meant to rule by divine authority. Okay. So you see that these ideas thus find a resonance in Europe with all these changes, and the Congress of Vienna was not able to completely undo these changes. Okay. Now, any doubts till here? Firstly, yeah.
What kind of system should be established in these nations after became free from the dominance of Napoleon's rule? At the time of Napoleon, continental system was there. After became free from the dominance of Napoleon, what kind of system in context of their economy?
Hmm. Okay, so basically, what you're asking is that after the overthrow of Napoleon, and you know that the continental system is abolished and Napoleon is no longer there. So, what is the nature of the economy, and what are the major economic systems? So, one of the things that we see is that after Napoleon is overthrown, and the continental system obviously is already abolished, you see that Britain again is, playing, is again one of the most powerful economies in Europe. France also has also started on the path of industrial revolution, and you see that there are movements at this point of time when, I mean, we'll be discussing next, where you see that Prussia brings about a formation of a customs union to unite all German speaking areas into a common market so that Prussian industries could dominate these areas and could dominate these markets. And you see Prussia moves towards industrial revolution. So Prussia also moves towards industrial revolution after France, and that is also something which is happening after this. And you see that slowly most of the European countries move towards industrial revolution, the last of which was Russia, which is moving towards industrial revolution only in 1900. Okay, so you see that there is a movement. Firstly, it's Britain, then it's France, then it is Prussia, and Prussia is later which becomes the leader of Germany. And so Germany undergoes an industrial revolution. After Germany, you see the next major power that we talk about as undergoing an industrial revolution is Russia in Europe. Okay. That's the whole rough process. Okay. Anything else? Okay, let's first write down then about the Congress of Vienna. Firstly, let's write down the objectives. Oh, sorry. So let's first write down the objectives of Congress of Vienna. In terms of objectives of Congress of Vienna, the first objective was to undo the changes introduced by Napoleon during his rule and turn the clock backwards on Europe to reinstate it to a pre 1789 or a pre French Revolution era. The second objective was to lift Europe out of the frequent wars, that it had found itself in during the Napoleonic years. That is, to establish peace and stability between European states. Thirdly, the third objective was to ensure a continuity of rule and stability within states and overcome the instability induced by overthrow of monarchies across Europe. And the fourth objective was to undo the nationalistic impulses of uniting all the German speaking all German speaking or Italian speaking areas into separate nations unleashed during the Napoleonic period. All these were the objectives. To achieve the above objectives, the following policies were adopted by the Congress of Vienna. A. The principle of legitimate rule. the principle of legitimate rule was applied to reinstate monarchies across Europe to end or overcome political instability within states. For example, Bourbon dynasty was reinstated in France, Naples, just a second. The Bourbon dynasty was reinstated in France, Naples, and Spain. The Holy Roman Empire was reinstated in Rome. The House of Orange. See, we can't be discussing the details of any of this, every of this. Okay, just even the broad 3 points in each of the principles, if you can remember, And the only way I have figured out to remember them is actually just read it twice and thrice, and also always coordinate it with a map, because that brings in some logic to the whole situation. That, for example, we'll see that according to the principle of rewarding victor powers, it was also fused with the principle of ensuring that the balance of power is returned in Europe. And so the idea was that France must be surrounded by strong states from all sides. Meaning, for example, Prussia must be given territories adjacent to France. And Rhine region is the region between France and Prussia. So Rhine region thus was given to France, Prussia. Rhine region was thus given to Prussia, so that there is a strong state in the north of France, and that is Prussia. Similarly, Belgium and Holland are also being united at this point of time. Why? Because Belgium and Holland are also in the north of France. So you see that, for example, if France is here, then one strong state here was to be Prussia. The other strong state was already here. That was Austria. Also, in the north of France, the idea was that between France and Prussia is what is Belgium. Okay, Belgium is a small, very small country between France and Germany today. Then between France and Prussia, and Belgium and Holland were to be kept together. Now, all of this is happening. Why? So that, and Spain is also there, right? So the whole idea was that France was not, or the extent of France was to be such that it is surrounded by strong states from all sides, and it does not find easy to, again, undo the balance of power. Though, because even if monarchy was being reinstated in France, there was no surety that the Bourbon dynasty would not try to, use the balance of power if it was in its favor. Okay, so the idea also was to surround France with strong states from all sides. So, I mean, with some logic and some rectification, you can remember this. Okay, that's there. Now, basically, thus, when we look at the House of Orange, was reinstated in Holland. These were the principles of legitimate rule on the basis of which monarchies were reinstated. The second was and the legitimate rule is the divine right to rule, right? The other principle was the principle of reinstating the balance of power in Europe, according to which France was to be surrounded by strong states from all sides, which was likely to decrease the chances of a future French aggression against its neighbors. To achieve this, all territories acquired by Napoleon were all territories acquired by Napoleon were taken away, and France was to be restored to a pre-1789 position. Example, the Rhine region was handed over to Russia. Apart from the Rhine region, you see that Belgium and Holland were united to form a strong state north of France. The third principle was the principle of rewarding victorious powers. And the principle of rewarding victorious powers saw the major players in the defeat of Napoleon staking a claim over a number, of territories freed from Napoleon's rule. For example, Austria was declared the leader of the German Confederacy of 39 states. Austria was declared the leader of German Confederacy of 39 states. Then, Austria was declared the leader of the German Confederacy of 39 states. Also, for example, you see that Lombardia and Lombardia and Venetia were handed over. Lombardia and Venetia were handed over to Austria. Polish-speaking areas were divided between Prussia and Russia. So you see that that's also something which was followed. And finally, we talk about the impact. Russia and Russia, right? Now, finally, we talk about the impact. And so, again, in terms of impact, we say that the aim of restoring peace to Europe was partly achieved as no major European war was witnessed for the next 99 years until the breakout of World War I. However, other objectives of the Congress of Vienna could not be achieved. For example, the revolution of 1848 in Austria overthrew von Metternich. Who was the long-standing monarch and a key architect of the Congress of Vienna. So this was not achieved. Then the German and Italian nationalist impulses finally culminated in the German and Italian unification in 1870-71 period. The monarchy in France was eventually overthrown and a republic was established in 1871. So, as a conclusion, we say, the French Revolution, as a conclusion, we say that the Congress of Vienna could not completely undo the ideas of the French Revolution unleashed during the Napoleonic era, even though it brought a period of relative peace to Europe. Clear? So, yeah. Any doubts still here? Okay. Then the next topic, finally, French Revolution is complete. The next topic that we're talking about is the German unification. And German unification is an important topic because of the role of Bismarck in it. So, just like Bismarck is considered one of the strongest leaders during the 1800s, okay? So once you see his Napoleon, then you see his Metternich, then you see it's Bismarck, you know, who from 1862 till 1900 was one of the most dominating figures and the most influential figures in Europe. And he was the one who was also considered as the architect of Germany, who played a key role in the unification of Germany. Okay, so that is why we are going to talk about the unification of Germany. Also, why? Because this is the first time when the German state is coming into existence, and you see that is why I was when we were discussing Indian history also, I had often pointed out that the idea of nation states or idea of linguistically homogeneous nation states getting formed together was a distinctively European idea, which was a very recent origin. And that is that you see that France here, before this, is an empire. France is becoming a nation state in 1871. Okay, Britain also, so apart from France, you for example see Germany, you example see Italy, you example see Russia. All of these are moving over from being empires. And when Russia was an empire, it had again a variety of different races and linguistic groups within it. But when it became a state, it was predominantly Russia was predominantly the one which was to be composed of Russian speaking people, though the Soviet Union had different linguistic and racial groups also within it. So you see that European nationalism was relatively monolinguistic, monoracial, and monoreligious in nature. Okay, and that's something that is being witnessed during the 1800s. Yeah.
Rhineland was the German
Huh.
it was given to Russia.
Huh.
And the 29 states that you were talking about was given to Austria.
Okay. So yeah, that's a valid question, and we'll be probably coming to it in a while when we talk about German unification. That I told you, Rhineland is given to Prussia, and 39 German-speaking states are being formed in a loose confederacy under the leadership of Austria. Now, these 39 states also includes Prussia, also includes other areas also, and we'll see a German map where we'll see that all German-speaking areas together, including Prussia, were made a part of this loose confederacy. Okay, so we'll talk about Prussia-Austria relations also in a while. Okay, there we'll see all of that. Now, we say that from your examination point of view, what is important is the unification of Germany, the stages in unification of Germany, and the wars in unification of Germany, and the role of Bismarck and Bismarck's policy in unification of Germany. So what we are going to do is, firstly, we are going to look at initial attempts to unify Germany and the events that went into the unification of Germany, and then we're going to talk about Bismarck's policies. Okay, so to understand that, what we also need to do, firstly, is to look at a German map. Okay, because without that, it's kind of difficult. Now, to look at to look at a German map, firstly, what we need to understand that, okay, first a brief background, even before we look at the map. Okay, so forget the map for a second, just first understand this first, that when we look at, okay, when we look at this whole period, you see one of the things to understand actually is that there were German speaking populations in Prussia. This is France, this is Prussia, this is Austria. We say actually that the whole German speaking areas were together 39 states. Okay, they were before Napoleon they were 300 big and large, but after Napoleon they were 39. And these 39 areas were distributed in such a manner that a major German-speaking population was in Prussia. In North Austria, also there was a good amount of German-speaking population. Also, there were German-speaking areas here, okay, in the Rhine region, okay, and these German-speaking areas were there in the Rhine region. And apart from the Rhine region also, I mean, for example, you see that this is what is the Rhine region. Okay, but even apart from the Rhine region, there were other German-speaking areas in the north. Okay, and there were also German-speaking areas in south, which was not a part of Austria. So apart from these French and Austrian regions, you see that there were northern Germanic states, there were southern Germanic states, then there was German-speaking population in Prussia as well as in Austria. Now, why we are saying this is that northern Germanic states were united first, then southern Germanic states. And one of the things also which has to be understood is that these areas were never united together into one common area, into one common political unit before. Also, what is to be understood that when we talk about unification of Germany, in 1815, the monarchs in Prussia nor in Austria were very keen on a unification of all German-speaking areas, because one of the constant things that also was there after 1815 was that it is the period of the age of Metternich in Europe, and the age of Metternich in Europe meant, and these all areas, you know, the northern, the southern, and Prussia and Austria, forget France, all these areas are actually a part of the German Confederation. These are all the part of a German Confederation. So in 1815, the leader of the German Confederation, though it is a very loose confederation, the leader of the German Confederation is Austria. And it is clear that if at all these German areas were to be united together, it would be united under the leadership of Austria. Okay, and under the leadership of Metternich. But Metternich was not at all keen in this, because that would mean, you know, subduing Prussia, that would mean another war, and there was no urge that, you know, Metternich felt for uniting all German-speaking areas. And another reason why he did not feel any urge for uniting German-speaking areas is because Austria was not only composed of German-speaking population. Okay, so Austria had other racial as well as linguistically diverse populations apart from German-speaking population. So one of the reasons, because of these reasons, Austria was never keen on pursuing a unification of Germany. And Prussia was, though strong, Austria was way more stronger than Prussia in terms of military might at this point of time. And so the possibility, of Prussia, you know, subduing Austria to unify German-speaking areas was a bit difficult to achieve. However, you see that given the fact that without Austria's support, a unification was not possible, and Austria was powerful, more powerful than Prussia, Prussia could not lead a unification process of Germany at this point of time. Also, what it was important who was going to lead the process, because they are going to dominate Germany if and when it is formed. Okay, so if Austria was to lead the unification process, Austria was to dominate Germany. If Prussia was to lead the unification process, it was to dominate Germany. Now, it is in this process that you see that 1819 onwards, or merely 4 years later, you see an attempt is started in Prussia. And the attempt in Prussia was to form a customs union of all German-speaking areas. A customs union of all German-speaking areas was to be formed. And why was this customs union to be formed? What is a custom? You've studied economy, right? A customs union is what? It would have no internal tariffs. It would allow a free movement of goods, right? So a customs union was sought by Prussia because Prussia intended to move towards the Industrial Revolution. The Rhine region was also under its control. The Rhine region was also rich in minerals. Okay, and Prussia was keen to start and embark on an industrial revolution. But again, industrial revolution also needed the availability of a market. But Britain and France were already on the way of the industrial revolution and capturing the European market. So it was going to be a tough battle for Prussian industries to find a place for themselves. And that is why the understanding was that something had to be done to give Prussia a preferential market in some areas of Europe. And so the idea of customs union was devised, where Prussia was to approach all German-speaking areas to come together in a common customs union. Okay, so customs union is also said is that it is a kind of which allows a free movement of goods, meaning no internal tariffs, meaning a preference to goods produced within the region and who were also member of that customs union. So that was to basically lower the internal tariffs, and basically it would allow a preferential access to Prussian-speaking goods, to Prussian industries within all German-speaking areas, right? That is the whole idea of a customs union, right? And this was to prevent the competition from Britain and France. Now, this is what is being pursued from 1919 onwards, and by 1934, 34 big and small German-speaking areas were united together into a common customs union, which is called as Zollverein, not Wolverine. Okay. So basically, this all German-speaking areas except Austria. Austria is not a part of this economic union. Austria refused to be a part of this economic union because it was unlikely to be a part of a customs union which was to be under the leadership of Prussia. Given the fact that Austria considered itself to be a leader of Europe at this point of time and also of the German-speaking people. Right? So that's the reason why Austria refused to be a part of this Zollverein or the customs union. That is why this is economic unification. We argue that in case of Germany, it is economic unification which happens first and then is later a political unification. Okay. And I'll explain you the significance of this a bit further later. Now, basically you see that this process of economic unification of German-speaking areas under Prussian leadership starts from 1819, and by 1834, a common customs union of 34 German-speaking areas is formed. And in 1834, what is happening is that the Prussian industries have thus managed to capture the market in these German-speaking areas. And the Prussian capitalist class from now on was strongly in support of unification of Germany. Why? Because it was this unification which could offer them a strong hold over the German market. Right? So you see the capitalist class was in favor of, the Prussian capitalist class was in favor of the unification of Germany. And you see that this is happening by 1834. Now in 1848, Metternich is overthrown in a popular uprising in Austria. And with the overthrow of Metternich in a popular uprising in Austria, you see that the Frankfurt Parliament, okay, basically there's a popular uprising in Austria in 1848, and Metternich is overthrown. And the confederation, now if Metternich is overthrown, what happens to this confederation? This confederation of 39 states, right? So now, basically in Prussia at this point of time, in Austria, the ruler was Metternich. In Prussia, the ruler was at this point of time Frederick William IV. No need to remember the names. If you can, it's okay. If you can't, then also it's fine. Now, Frederick William IV is the ruler in France at this point of, in Prussia at this point of time, and Metternich is in Austria. Now, Metternich is overthrown, and the Frankfurt Parliament was to be the place where the parliament which was to head the confederation of all 39 states was located. With the popular uprising, when Metternich was overthrown, the popular movement offered now the Prussian king to be the head of the German Confederation. Okay, the Prussian king was offered to be the head of the German Confederation, but he was told that this German Confederation will not be an absolute monarchy; it would be a constitutional monarchy. So Frederick William IV was offered the opportunity of being by the people, by the popular movement. Frederick William IV was offered the opportunity to be a constitutional monarch to head the Frankfurt Parliament and the German Confederation. But Prussia and Frederick William IV rejected this offer in 1848. Why? Because Frederick William IV was an absolute monarch in Prussia. And why would he to accept? And that is why he called this offer to be the offer, he rejected this offer, terming it to be the opportunity, or terming it to be an insult to the Prussian king, terming it to be a pig's crown. And he said that this is nothing more than a pig's crown because it does not offer any substantive power. And the monarchy did not like the idea that the Prussian monarch was being invited by whom? The people. rather than the monarch ruling because of divine rule, he is being brought in because of the wishes of the popular movement. So he rejected this idea of being a constitutional monarch at this point of time. Also, another thing that happens is that Prussia does not want to upset the Austrian nobility at this point of time, because if Prussia was to intervene into an Austrian crisis, this would actually lead to the deterioration of relations between Prussia and Austria. So this was the reason, these all were the reasons why you see that Frederick William IV rejected the offer of being the head of this German Confederation. And this is seen as the failure of liberal methods to unify Germany. What is liberal? Liberalism kya hai? Liberalism is more power to the people, freedom of speech and expression. People must be given a say in the process or in any political process. That is what liberal ideas are, right? Or more democratization, more freedom. That is what liberalism is. So what is this seen as? This is seen as a failure of the people's movement to unify all German-speaking areas under one common leadership. Okay, and you see that Kaiser William IV rejected this offer of 1848. By 1858, a 10-year later, you see that Frederick William IV dies in Prussia, and you see by 1861, there is the coming of the next Prussian monarch, and his name is Kaiser William I. Okay, now again, no need to remember the name, but in 1861, when Kaiser William I comes, he is in the favor of pursuing a political unification of German-speaking areas under Prussian leadership. Okay. Also, there is a realization and that there is no possibility of Prussia and Austria together being a part of Germany, because otherwise there would always be a constant battle of who would lead Germany. Okay, and at this point of time, to bring about a political unification of German-speaking areas, Kaiser William I appoints Bismarck as the Prime Minister. Now, a brief background about Bismarck. Yeah, as initially the Prime Minister, and there the Prime Minister is called the Chancellor. Okay. Now, basically, Kaiser William I appointed Bismarck as the Prime Minister, and a brief background about Bismarck. Bismarck came from the came from the family of nobles in Prussia. His family was an erstwhile landed elite in Prussia. He himself was a part of the Prussian foreign office, and he was an ambassador of Prussia before becoming the Prime Minister. So he had been long associated with the Prussian Empire and the Prussian monarchy, and also he was also himself a staunch nationalist who was in favor of uniting all Prussian-speaking areas together. But his viewpoint was that all German-speaking areas together. But his viewpoint was that this unification of Germany must happen only and only under the Prussian leadership. And if it has to happen only under the Prussian leadership, there can be no role for Austria in this. Also, his idea was that this strong united Germany would then go on to dominate Europe. Okay, so it's not just to unify German-speaking areas, but to unify German-speaking areas under Prussian leadership, which was eventually to dominate Europe. Also, what was Bismarck's understanding was that he himself came from those who were long associated with the Prussian monarchy. So even when he was a strongly nationalist individual, he was not in the favor of the overthrow of the monarchy. Rather, he was a conservative nationalist or a conservative individual who was in favor of a strong monarchy to head a strong united Germany, not in favor of a leadership being given in the hands of people or anything. He's not the one who is in favor of a popular revolt, people taking power, etc. And he saw the failure of the Frankfurt Parliament in 1848 to unite all German-speaking areas as a reflection of the fact that liberal efforts cannot solve the major questions of the day. For example, what are the liberal methods? The process of deliberation, the process of giving people more power in the say, etc., will not actually solve the major important struggles of the day. Rather, the unification of German-speaking areas cannot happen merely by talks, by negotiations, etc. It will happen only and only with the use of force. Or only and only the use of force can unify all German-speaking areas together under a Prussian leadership. So, for example, if we look at solving the Kashmir question, if there is a section there is a viewpoint which says that one should deliberate more with the separatists, with different political factions in Kashmir, and through peace, through deliberations with the Kashmiri separatists or the militant groups or with Pakistan, the question of Kashmir can be solved. Those will be called as liberal efforts. Okay? But if somebody says that no, it is not these talks which are going to resolve the Kashmir question, it is predominantly the use of force with which we can be resolved, then that is a different viewpoint. So you see, they are contesting viewpoints on how a problem can be solved. So the failure of the Frankfurt Parliament was in 1848 to unite German-speaking areas was seen by Bismarck as a reflection of the fact that some unification of Germany is not going to happen in a peaceful manner, where mainly by talks, all German-speaking areas will be united under the leadership of Prussia. Because he said, even if there is a possibility of unification of German-speaking areas, then Austria will always try to dominate it. So he's saying that it's not going to be settled without the use of force. And so Bismarck argued that the most important questions of the day are not solved by deliberations and talks, but only by the use of force or the use of policy of blood and iron. The policy of blood and iron, which emphasized what is iron here? What is iron here is also strength. Okay, and what is blood is signifying is war. Okay, and if the strength, what is the strength that is being emphasized upon? Is the strength, is the armed strength, and also is the economic strength. Okay, that one of the things that Bismarck does from 1862 when he's appointed as the prime minister, that he's in a reflection of this policy of blood and iron, he starts increasing the military expenditure on the Prussian army. He increases the size of the Prussian army. He moves more towards the modernization of the Prussian army. And this process had actually begun in 1861. He gives it a more decided push. Okay, and he gives it a more decided push. He increases the expenditure on the army. And for increasing the expenditure on the army, what was required? A strong economy. And a strong economy was being pursued since 1830s with the Zollverein coming into place. It was the Prussian Industrial Revolution which strengthened the Prussian economy, which turned the Prussian capitalist class in favor of a united Germany. It was the growth of the Prussian economy which gave it the resources with which to pursue a modernization of the Prussian army. And that is why it is also stated that the policy of blood and iron could be pursued only because of the success of policy of coal and iron. Blood and iron is what? The pursuing a strong state in Prussia. And the policy of coal and iron is pursuing a strong economy in Russia. It is only the strong economy that was established in Prussia is what allowed the establishment of a strong political state in Prussia which could pursue the political unification. So that is why you see that Zollverein, and that is why it is, there can be also be a question like this in your mains examination, where it can be asked that the policy of blood and iron could succeed only because of the success of the policy of coal and iron. Discuss. Or another question can be in a similar way, that how did the formation of Zollverein impact the unification of Germany? Okay, so these questions can be formed. Okay, now before we discuss exactly what happens in the unification process, that we'll talk about, but let's first write down this much. Any doubt still here, firstly? 34. Austria was not a part of it, and some other smaller southern German speaking states, southern Germanic states was also not a part of this. But predominantly Austria, the bigger one, the big one, was not a part of this Solbri. Pardon? No, no, I'm saying German speaking areas. I'm saying Persia is what? Persia is Iran. Right? Persia has got nothing to do with this. When we say the German Confederation, in the German Confederation, out of the 39, 34 were a part of this. Okay? The one of the biggest ones, that was Austria, was not a part of this. Huh. It starts with 19. It starts, this whole unification is starting with 19 states and ultimately goes on to 34. Slowly and slowly they keep on expanding. It starts with 19 states initially to expand to even 34 at a later stage by 1934. Okay. Now, so let's first write down this much and then we'll take forward. Any other doubts still here? Okay. The German unification. You can write down one or two questions also first. Discuss the impact of formation of Zollverein in 1934, in 1834 upon the unification process of Germany. Similar question can be, that discuss to what extent the policy of coal and iron played an important role in the success of Bismarck's policy of blood and iron. Now, so let's, this is a timeline. Firstly, for the process of German unification from 1919 till 1819 till 1871. Now, 1819 onwards, an attempt was initiated by Prussia to bring together all German-speaking states into a common customs union. This was sought to be done to eliminate internal tariffs, between German speaking areas and give a preferential market access to Prussian goods, to Prussian industries, allowing them to compete, allowing them to compete against the more developed British and French industries. By 1834, a customs union called Zollverein was established under Prussian leadership. However, Germany refused to be a party. Austria refused to be a party to this customs union. This resulted in the economic fate of smaller This resulted in the economic fate of smaller German speaking areas getting tied more closely. This resulted in the economic fate of smaller German speaking areas getting tied more closely with Prussia than with Austria. This is also, one can also say that this is the first impact of Zollverein. The second impact of Zollverein also was it allowed the Prussian industries to capture the German-speaking market and thus enabled the rise of the Prussian economy. Zollverein, or the policy of coal and iron, on the one hand, allowed the building of a strong Russian economy, which was to later finance the expansion of the Prussian army under Bismarck's rule. Third impact also is the Prussian capitalist class strongly supported the unification of Germany. The Prussian capitalist class strongly supported the unification of Germany under Prussian leadership, as this was to allow a deeper control of German markets by Prussian industries. That's there. Now, in 1848, Metternich, in 1848, Metternich was overthrown in Austria by a popular uprising. Metternich was overthrown in Austria by a popular uprising, which offered the Prussian ruler Frederick William IV to lead the constitutional monarchy of all German speaking states. However, this offer was rejected by Russia, given Frederick William IV's opposition to the idea of a constitutional monarchy which would vastly limit his powers. Thus, 1848 Thus, thus the failure of the 1848 revolution to bring about the unification of Germany. There's the failure of 1848 revolution to bring about the unification of Germany was seen as a failure of liberal methods. Was seen as a failure of liberal methods to achieve political unification. (1861) is when you see that Kaiser William I rose to the throne of Prussia. He supported the idea of political unification of Germany under Russian leadership. Under Prussian leadership. Okay, now, so basically, then we talked about how Bismarck is actually in favor of also, he's being brought in with this whole purpose. That Bismarck is brought in with the purpose that he must oversee and he must bring about the unification of Germany, which is also in line with Kaiser William I's aim. And Bismarck also is strongly supportive of this idea. So the first thing that Bismarck starts to do is he started increasing the expenditure on the German army. And why was an expenditure on the German army was to be increased? If at all, unification of Germany was to be pursued, because Prussia and Bismarck were of the opinion that any unification of Germany under Prussian leadership is something that is most likely to result in a war between Prussia and its neighbors. Because if Prussia is to unite northern Germanic states, southern Germanic states, all of them together under the Prussian leadership, then obviously Austria is not going to simply sit by through it. And the rise of a strong state in the neighbor of France, Austria, Russia, in the form of a strong Germany, is not something that the leaders of France, Austria, as well as Russia are silently going to sit by and watch. They are also going to try and probably not see any change in the balance of power, right? So not everybody is going to sit peacefully through the rise of Germany under Prussian leadership. And so you see that Bismarck was of the opinion that any process of unification is likely to lead to a change in the balance of power in Europe, and something that is not going to be very easily supported by the neighbors of Prussia, and is likely to lead to a political conflict. And so you need a strong army to begin with. Now, that is the reason why you see the unification of Germany is actually happening through a series of 3 wars that Bismarck pursues. The first war is pursued in 1862, after Bismarck comes in 1862. The first war is pursued in 1863, the next in 1866, and the next in 1870. one. Okay. Now, these wars are being pursued for three different regions. One war is pursued for northern Germanic states, the other war is pursued for southern Germanic states, and the third and another war is pursued primarily for the northernmost German-speaking areas of Schleswig and Holstein. Now, let's first see the map, then it will become actually clear that if you see this map, what you will see that in this map, if you see these areas of Schleswig and Holstein at the top, these were the northernmost German-speaking areas, okay? And these Schleswig and Holstein had been given to, Schleswig and Holstein had been handed over to Denmark by the Congress of Vienna. Okay, so the Congress of Vienna, apart from other things, also, where it was redistributing territories, Schleswig and Holstein were handed over to Denmark, not as territories, but as protectorates, or as one whose administration was to be overseen by Denmark. So, Schleswig and Holstein were actually given and were under the loose control of Denmark at this point of time. Now, these are German-speaking areas. The first war is being fought primarily to take over the control of these northernmost German territories. These are not the northern Germanic states. I will tell you what the northern Germanic states are. These are the northernmost German-speaking territories, which was sought to be taken back from Denmark. Okay, and this is what led to the first war. Okay, now the first war breaks out in 1863 when Denmark sought to complete, or Denmark sought to completely annex Schleswig and Holstein, and already Bismarck was planning to launch a war to take over Schleswig and Holstein from Denmark. Already Bismarck was planning a war to take over Schleswig and Holstein from Denmark, and his job was made easier because as soon as Denmark declared that it was formally going to annex Schleswig and Holstein, which were already its protectorates, this gave the reason to Bismarck to announce a war against Denmark. Okay, but if Bismarck was to announce a war against Denmark, it was not that Prussia could not defeat Denmark without any external support. Prussia could defeat Denmark without any external support. But if Schleswig and Holstein were German-speaking areas and Prussia was to pursue taking these areas from Denmark, other players were not going to sit silent. Okay, and Austria also has a number of German-speaking areas. So you see that Bismarck could foresee this possibility that any attack on Denmark is going to lead to a counter-attack by Prussia's neighbors on Prussia, because nobody is going to sit silently through a upset in the balance of power. So even before launching the attack on Denmark, Bismarck entered into a secret treaty with Austria and said that we should send in joint forces to defeat Denmark, and we will divide the territories. You will keep Schleswig and we will keep Holstein. So Austria was to be granted Schleswig and Prussia was to be granted, Austria was to be granted Schleswig and Prussia was to be granted Holstein. So the understanding was that we will distribute German-speaking territories amongst ourselves. Let's not fight amongst ourselves. Rather, let's take back these German-speaking areas from Denmark. So that is what happened in 1863, that in the first war, Austrian and Prussian forces joined hand together against Denmark. They defeat Denmark and they take Schleswig and Holstein. Schleswig goes to Austria and Holstein goes to Prussia. Okay. Now, but that is not all. That's only the first war. The next war breaks out in 1866, and the next war is primarily that you see, which are these areas that you see in blue. Okay, these are which are the territories of Prussia. Okay, and basically what you see that these other Okay, I think the color there is not showing that well. Now, if you see that these blue territories, okay, this is what is Prussia. These territories here in between, you know, the color is not very well visible, but there is a blue color, and the other one which you can't see any color is basically the northern Germanic states. The northern Germanic states were small and large territories interspread in the northern portion of Europe alongside Prussia. Okay, not a part of Prussia, but already in a economic union with Prussia. Okay, so already in economic union with Prussia, but not a political union. So basically, these northern Germanic states, this all these areas were actually not in a they were not in a political union with Prussia, and these northern Germanic states were already in economic union with the time of Zollverein from 1834 onwards. At this point of time, now Bismarck has the idea that he wants to now go ahead and do the political unification with these northern Germanic states. However, he is very well aware of the fact that neither Austria nor France nor Russia is going to silently sit through this. So, after 1863, he firstly tries to assure the French and Russian neutrality in this war. Okay, and to buy French and Russian neutrality, he tells France, if we win these areas, if you stay neutral, if you don't interfere in this war, France will give the Rhine province to Russia will give the Rhine province to France if France stays neutral in this war. If at all any war breaks out, France should not interfere in the Prussian annexation of northern Germanic states. As a return, Prussia will give the Rhine province, which was already a part of Prussia, to France. Okay, this is just a zoomed in map only of the German speaking areas. Okay, so France is outside this. So basically that was the secret offer that Bismarck made to France, King Napoleon III. He gave this offer to Napoleon III: we will give you the territories in Rhine region, you just stay out of any possible war if at all it breaks out if we try to annex the northern German speaking areas. To ensure Russian neutrality, what Bismarck had done was that Bismarck projected Prussia as a supporter of monarchies all throughout. And in 1863, there was a popular uprising in Russia. And the popular uprising in Russia was against the monarchy, which demanded the overthrow of monarchy in Russia. And Bismarck sent in the Prussian forces to support the Russian monarchy and to crush the popular uprising in Russia. So with the Prussian support that he extended to Russia in the uprising in 1863 in Russia, he established friendly relations with Russia. And with the friendly relations with Russia, he ensured that Russia would not interfere in any possible Prussian initiative to unite German-speaking areas. So on the one hand, you see that Prussia is getting Russian neutrality with a support to the Russian monarchy during the uprising in 1863. On the other hand, Prussia is also getting the French neutrality with the promise of handing over the Rhine region to France. Okay. Now, just a second. Now, also, but if he has got Russian neutrality and he's also got the French neutrality, what still leaves the challenges from one, and that is Austria. Austria is likely to challenge, is definitely going to challenge Russia, is definitely going to challenge Prussia, because again it has a significant German-speaking population, and it found itself, it also staked always a claim in any settlement of boundaries in this region. So Austria was likely to oppose any unilateral Prussian efforts to take up or gobble up all German-speaking areas that was known by Bismarck. And so Bismarck decides to attack Austria. And in 1866, Bismarck attacked Austria, and within a span of 7 weeks, Bismarck's or a Prussian army defeated Austria. Because of the 20 years of industrial revolution since 1830s, because of the strength of the Prussian economy and the expenditure on the army, the Prussian army had been modernized, and the Prussian army was superior to the Austrian army at this point of time. And Prussia easily managed to defeat Austria, ensuring that Russia did not intervene, ensuring that the French did not intervene. This is what happened in the Second War. I'll take it over. Now, but this is something that happens by 1866. And by 1866, you see that two of the wars have been fought. With the first war, you see that Schleswig and Holstein were taken. With the second war, you see the northern Germanic states were taken. And even Schleswig, which was handed over to Austria initially after the first war, is taken over by Germany, is taken over by Prussia by the Second War. When Prussia defeats Austria in Second War, it takes over all these northern Germanic states. It also takes over the control of Schleswig from Austria. Okay, so Schleswig and Holstein are now a part of Prussia, and so are the northern Germanic states. However, it left the southern Germanic states still behind. And from now on, Austria is no longer a major threat to Prussia. And Prussia has enforced its supremacy over Austria and had so strongly defeated Austria in the war that there was no possibility of Austria trying to challenge Prussia at this point of time. And the last major unification is of this region of Bavaria. Okay, and this Bavarian region is what is predominantly the region of the southern Germanic states. Okay, and these southern Germanic states are again, to become a part of Germany, but not without a war. And why did this war break out? If Austrian was no longer going to challenge, Russia was already neutral, and French also had been promised the Rhine region, because of which the French were also not going to fight the war. Then why was a war to break out? The war was to break out because Bismarck did not honor the promise that he made to Napoleon III that after the Second War, after the Austro-Prussian War of 1866, he would hand over the Rhine region. So by 1866, after the war was over, he was supposed to hand over the Rhine region as a result of his secret promise that he had made to Napoleon III. But he refuses to honor the promise. He refuses to acknowledge the promise. He does not even pay any emphasis on this. And this makes Napoleon III very angry, who was expecting Prussia to honor its promise to France at this point of time. But this is all secret. This is all a secret honor. And Napoleon Bismarck does not say anything about this. He simply chooses to forget. However, Napoleon III is not very keen on forgetting. And he actually writes a number of letters to Bismarck. And finally, in 1871, he threatens Bismarck that if you do not fulfill your promise of handing over the Rhine region to us, something that you had promised in 1866, we will attack Prussia. Okay. Now, this is the time when, firstly, Bismarck makes the letter written by Napoleon III public. Okay. And Bismarck says, and he makes the letter written by Napoleon III public to the people of Prussia, but by selectively deleting the portion where it was written by the king, by Napoleon III, that Bismarck had promised him Rhine. So rather, he just relieved the part of the letter which said that France was threatening to annex Prussia and to take over the Rhine region. Okay, and this was given as the justification to attack France. And you see that Prussia attacks France in the Third War, And you see, in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71, you see that Prussia decisively defeats Napoleon III. And Napoleon III, the French king himself, is captured by the Prussian forces. And along with 83,000 French troops, which were made prisoners of war and who were captured by Prussia. Prussia forced France to surrender. And with this, Prussia forced France to surrender, and the southern Germanic states voluntarily joined Prussia. Okay, and southern Germanic states voluntarily joined Prussia, and you see the unification of Germany is complete, and Germany thus was united under Prussian leadership. But yes, you see there is a German-speaking population even in Austria which does not get united, and you see that despite that Austria and Prussia had hostile relations from 1860s to 70s. You see that after 1870s, there is again a return of a more peaceful relations between Germany and Austria. Why? Because the shared cultural links, the shared linguistic links, etc. You see that Bismarck does not pursue any policy of hostility towards Austria after this point of time. And why he is doing that, we'll talk about it later. But what happens in the Franco-Prussian War 1870-71 also is that not only Napoleon III is defeated, but this is not just a defeat, but this is a very humiliating defeat. Because rather than handing over Rhine region, rather than handing over the Rhine region, what Bismarck does is he takes this region of Lorraine or Alsace-Lorraine. देखिए, Alsace-Lorraine was a French territory and Rhine region was a German territory, and they are in the border. Okay, so rather than handing over the Rhine region, Bismarck takes over the Alsace-Lorraine region from France. And Alsace-Lorraine region was actually a mineral and coal-rich region which provided a lot of raw materials for the French industries. Okay, and these raw materials were valuable, and because of the mineral-rich region, these mineral-rich region later fueled the Industrial Revolution further in Germany. Okay, and the German industries were to depend on the raw materials which were drawn from the Alsace-Lorraine region. Not just that French territories were captured by Germany in 1871, but also Napoleon III was captured and imprisoned, and this treaty, and the treaty with which Prussia takes over Alsace-Lorraine is again a treaty which is signed in the Paris city, in the seat of the French Empire, which is the Palace of Versailles. Okay, so the Palace of Versailles, which was the summer capital and the summer house of the French king, sitting in that in the French palace, only Bismarck goes there and signs the treaty, and a treaty which is extremely humiliating, and which basically the Napoleon III was forced to sign, with which a number of French territories are taken away, and you see that this was a major humiliation for France. Okay, so 1871 war was not merely a war which unified Germany, but it also humiliated France, and a number of French territories were taken away. And it is often argued that the 1871 was such a big humiliation for France that France was determined to take a revenge and to undo the Treaty of Paris that was signed in the Palace of Versailles in 1871, and ensure that the humiliation imposed on France by Germany is taken care of, and the revenge for it is taken eventually. Much later, 50 years later, when you see World War I ending, and Germany is defeated in World War I, again a treaty signed, again in the city of Paris, again in the same palace, where now it is the Germans who are being forced to sign the treaty by France. And for the first thing that France does is it takes back Alsace-Lorraine. The next thing that France does is it demilitarizes the Rhine region, and Germany is never allowed to keep any army in the Rhine region. Then it goes on to even take a part of German territory, which is the Ruhr region that we'll discuss later, which is also a mineral-rich region. So everything that Bismarck had imposed upon France, not just France tries to undo it, but also tries to attempt to impose similar revengeful terms on Germany after World War I. So it is also argued that the Franco-Prussian War of 1871 was sowing the seeds for the World War I. Okay. So that is one of the reasons why it is argued. And if you see, again, if you look at the Congress of Vienna, okay, the Congress of Vienna was also considered a far-reaching and a more visionary agreement, primarily because that even after defeating Napoleon, France was never humiliated. Rather, the French territories were never annexed, nor was the monarchy imposed, or nor was the monarchy, forced into any revengeful or into any major humiliation. Rather, the French negotiators in the Congress of Vienna played a very important role in having a say in the Congress of Vienna, which was not the case when Prussia defeated France. This was also not the case when Germany was defeated in World War I. You see that revengeful attitude was very strongly visible in the Treaty of Versailles once it was signed in World War I. But that was missing in the Congress of Vienna. And we'll talk about its significance later, but I'm just telling it to you here as a brief thing. Now, so that is why it is often argued that Bismarck, was a crafty politician, was a crafty statesman who was the main architect of the unification of Germany. He is the one who is bringing about a shift in the process away from liberalism towards the use of policy of blood and iron. And this policy of blood and iron was reflected in the series of 3 consecutive wars. In 1863, with Denmark for Schleswig and Holstein, in 1866, with Austria for control of northern Germanic states, and in 1871, with France or the Franco-Prussian War for the control of the southern Germanic states. All of this sees that within a decade of Bismarck coming to power, he unifies Germany. Okay? So that is why Bismarck is considered one of the key architects of the German unification process. Okay? So we'll write this down, but any doubts still here? Yeah.
Actually, I was asking that when French supported that states should unify on the basis of basis, why did Russia assure that it would give away Rhine province to France? Why?
So, exactly. So, what he's asking is that if it was all about unifying German-speaking areas together, then why would Prussia promise to give away Rhine region to France? Because Bismarck never had never had the intention to hand over. He just made the promise so as to ensure that the French do not intervene in any war with Austria. Now, one of the things also that you'll see is that later, after 1871, that after 1871, Bismarck, who fought 3 wars in 9 years, is in favor of fighting no other war until he is the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. From 1871 till 1890, Prussia, or now Germany, fights no war. Rather, Germany is trying to establish peace in Europe. And this is one of the things which differentiated him from many other leaders, that not just he was in favor of use of force, but he was also in favor of establishing peace, because he understood that just because you can win wars does not mean that you need to fight them. Okay. So Napoleon was the one who was an able fighter. Napoleon is a military commander. But Bismarck is not a military commander, has got nothing to do with the military. He is out and out a politician. Okay. And you see that one of the things that Napoleon does is that once after the first and second European coalition, he establishes his rule in France. He does not stop. Rather, he is in favor of more expansion. But Bismarck, once he consolidates Germany, he is not in favor of any further expansion. Rather, he is in favor of maintaining peace. Okay. Now, why is that? We'll talk about later. But you see that that's what is being pursued by Bismarck. Okay. Now, any doubts still here?
If there was any other reason why Russia
Why Russia was neutral?
They were part of the four quarter, but later they became neutral. They did not have any interest in Germany. So why do?
So as I told you that Russian neutrality was ensured because Bismarck sought to maintain close and friendly relations with Russia. That is the reason. And in fact, we'll see that after this, after 1871, Bismarck goes ahead to sign a treaty of peace and friendship with Russia. Okay, so we'll see that. In 1887, Bismarck signs a treaty of peace and perpetual friendship with Russia. He's keen on maintaining, relative peace with Russia at this point of time. Yeah. Rhine River's neutrality, yeah. See, so all of, I mean, देखिए, वही है कि when we'll write down, I'll write down a few more provisions that about, the Rhine River, etc. That again, the Rhine was seen as the natural dividing line. Rhine was seen as a natural dividing line between France and Prussia or Germany at this point of time. And even this, Rhine River was thought to be a relatively neutral boundary, which could even, be a potential dividing line that was sought even in 1866. Even in 1866, this was sought as an important way by which you could see a natural, a natural way of settling the boundaries with the French region. That was also there. Yeah. देखिए अब नेपोलियन कहाँ से आया? नेपोलियन को हम पीछे छोड़ा है. देखिए बहुत सारी छोटी छोटी चीजें हैं, लक्सेमबर्ग, हॉलैंड. आई एम जस्ट टॉकिंग अबाउट द ब्रॉड प्रोसेस. व्हाट यू सेइंग इज राइट. Okay, that there are many such small provisions. For example, I did not tell you that the southern Germanic states were the ones who were more closely aligned to the French and nor to Prussia, because the southern Germanic states were follower of the French Catholic Church and not the German Catholic Church or the Prussian Catholic Church. So there are other smaller points as well. But for the point of view of our exam, we need to simplify a bit. We can't be going into, too much depth. So, because one of the things is, we can study in as much as depth. It can become a history optional class also, and it can become only that, what is the, so I understand that, we can go in more depth also, but otherwise, pura German hi nahi khatam hoke dega. We have to discuss other things also. So, Treaty of Frankfurt was something that, again, that the Treaty of Frankfurt was sought primarily to establish particular peace between Prussia and both France as well as Austria. And the Treaty of Frankfurt was again was the one, and in fact the Germanic confederation that we talked about. And in 1848, when we talked about the popular uprising, the Frankfurt Parliament. The parliament or the people's revolution, which sought to give the Prussian monarch the leadership of the constitutional monarchy, was also called as the Frankfurt Parliament. So the Frankfurt Agreement was also sought to be a potential agreement which was to buy peace between Prussia, France, as well as Austria. Okay. So that's there, but nahi hai zarurat. Again, if you remember this much also, it's more than enough, because the question is going to come only about the stages, about unification of Germany, the role of Bismarck in it, and role of Bismarck's policy in both unification of Germany and rise of Europe, and rise of Germany within Europe. Okay, so that's something that we'll talk about. We have not talked about. And did Bismarck's policy also lead to World War I, or partly were Bismarck's policy, or to what extent one could blame Bismarck for the militarization of Europe, for the rise of unstable alliances in Europe, and the breakout of World War I. So that's another important substantive issue to discuss. Yeah. No role of? Was there any role of Britain in this whole process? Britain has got no role in this process. Britain is maintaining neutrality all out and out. Okay, Britain is not interfering in this process at this point of time at all. Okay, because Britain, the British people have a number of their own problems to deal with that we are not discussing here. Also, colonies. Prussia did not have many major colonies. Okay, it is only after the unification of Prussia into Germany from 1870s that Germany starts pursuing colonies in North Africa. German colonies actually start existing in North Africa only when Germany becomes a strong power, 1871 onwards. And Germany is pursuing colonies in North Africa. Germany is pursuing colonies in the Asia Pacific region, in the islands, in the Asia Pacific region. Okay, so that's the colonization is actually of where Germany plays an important role. Is happening only after 1871. Yeah.
When Bismarck defeated Austria in Second War, why did he not annex the German-speaking area of Austria?
Why did he not annex the German-speaking area of Austria is something that we'll understand later. Okay, that why he's not annexing. So what he's asking is a valid question, that why is he not trying to annex Austria or areas of Austria? Because of the understanding that he does not want any Austrian interference in Germany. Okay, so Bismarck was always clear from the very inception that he wanted to keep Austria out of any process of unification, because for Bismarck, German unification was important, but even what was more important was Prussian domination of this Germany. And also what you see from 1870s to 1890s that I have not discussed right now, but we'll discuss, is a decided focus on maintaining peace. After this, Bismarck is of the opinion that rather than fighting any other war, Germany should now focus on consolidating its hold. Prussia should consolidate its hold over Germany and push forward industrial revolution further to strengthen its economy, and most importantly, isolate France. So that, because he knew in 1871 itself, Bismarck knew that now France will try to take a revenge. And so his aim was not to fight any other force, rather to form alliances so as to isolate France and to maintain relative peace in Europe, so that industrial revolution in Germany could prosper and Germany could dominate the European economy. Okay, so that's something, and that is why he is not in favor of any further fighting after 1871. Okay, so we'll talk about that more, but let's first write down this much. Now, so 1862 was the year. Oh, sorry. So 1862 was the year in which Bismarck was appointed as the Prime Minister or Chancellor of Bismarck was appointed as the Prime Minister or Chancellor of Russia. With the aim of bringing about German unification. Now, the aims of Bismarck's policy were: A, to bring about a political unification of German-speaking areas. And actually, I have not told you, see, there is uh, there's a limit to which I can discuss. For example, there were two plans. One was Lesser Germany and other was Greater Germany. Okay, the Greater Germany plan was to have both Austria and Prussia into it. But Bismarck was not in favor of this idea of a Greater Germany. He was in favor of an idea of a Lesser Germany, which had no Austria into it. Okay, so there are many such details, but we can't be, so that's why I'm just, we're boiling it down to 3 or 4 major points, something that we can use. Okay, to bring about a political unification of German-speaking areas under Prussian leadership, and without any role for Austria in such a union. Okay. The other aim of Bismarck's policy was Bismarck aimed to establish German domination over Europe. To achieve these aims, okay, sorry, had one more objective. Just one more. So, Bismarck aimed to bring this political unification not under a popularly elected government, but under the leadership of a strong monarchy. To achieve these aims, Bismarck pointed out the limited or no utility of liberal methods in unification process. He pointed out that the Frankfurt Parliament had failed after the revolution of 1848 the Frankfurt Parliament had failed after the revolution of 1848 to establish a united Germany. B. Only the use of force backed by the deployment of a strong army could unify all German speaking areas together. Thus, Bismarck supported the use of force as an instrument. Thus, Bismarck supported the use of force as an instrument of state policy as the preferred strategy to bring about German unification. This was called as the policy of blood and iron. He said that the most important matters of the day cannot be negotiated and solved through talks and discussions. They are going to be solved through the use of force or through the use of blood and iron. So that is what Bismarck is arguing, and this was an element of Bismarck's policy, the policy of blood and iron. And this is where you see, as a result of this, as a result of these policies, 1863 is the Prussian and Austrian attack on Denmark to take over Schleswig and Holstein. The joint Prussian and Austrian forces defeated Denmark while Schleswig was handed to Austria, Holstein was handed to Russia. In 1866, the Austro-Prussian War and the annexation of northern Germanic states. And the annexation of northern Germanic states. Prussia ensured Russian neutrality in the war by in the war when Bismarck sent in Russian troops to crush an anti-monarchical uprising in Russia during 1863. Prussia ensured French neutrality by promising to hand over the Rhine region after the Austro-Prussian war was over. Prussia decisively defeated Austria within a span of 7 weeks and thus captured northern Germanic states and thus captured the northern Germanic states. (1870–71) is the Franco-Prussian War and the unification of southern Germanic states. Bismarck selectively leaked the letter by Napoleon III, which threatened to attack Prussia, to annex the Rhine region. And use this as a justification to launch a war against France. The Franco-Prussian War saw a humiliating defeat. The Franco-Prussian War saw a humiliating defeat imposed on France by Prussia. Napoleon III and 83,000 83,000 French soldiers were imprisoned by Prussia, and France was forced to surrender. And France was forced to surrender. The Treaty of Paris, 1871, was signed. The Treaty of Paris, 1871, was signed in the Palace of Versailles, the seat of French power. This was a major humiliation for France, as the French territories of Alsace-Lorraine were taken by Germany. As the French territories of Alsace-Lorraine were taken by Germany, which ultimately became a major point of discord between France and it is often argued that the germs of World War I were sowed by the humiliating terms of the Treaty of. It is often argued that the germs of World War I were sowed by the humiliating terms of the Treaty of Paris, 1871, which French aimed to take, a revenge, for which French aimed to take a revenge with the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, 50 years later. We'll say that Treaty of Versailles was signed in after World War I in 1919. It is often argued that the germs of World War I were sold by the humiliating terms of the Treaty of Versailles, by the Treaty of Paris 1871, for which French aimed to take a revenge with the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. After the German defeat in World War I. After the German defeat in World War I. Okay. Yeah, you're asking. Clear? Okay. Now, just one last thing that we need to discuss. It will not take more than 15 minutes, which I have legal right over, right? So, the last thing that we need to talk about is Bismarck's. We have not talked about, Bismarck's policies in general. One part of Bismarck's policy is coal and iron, but that part of Bismarck's policy only achieved one aim of Bismarck, and that is the unification of Germany. The other aim of Bismarck's policy was to ensure German domination over Europe. And for achieving that other aim of Bismarck's, the Bismarck also had another policy, and that was followed from 1870s to 1890 till he was the German Chancellor. And the aim, and what was these policies? The aim of this policy was ultimately to achieve the German domination over Europe. And Germans' domination over Europe had two potential challenges. One was France, and the other was Britain. If Germany had to dominate the whole of Europe, it had only two challenges. One was France and the other was Britain. Okay? So the first focus of this policy thus was to target France and ensure that France does not challenge Germany again. And to ensure that France does not challenge Germany again, their understanding was that France is not going to be challenged not going to be in a position to challenge Germany unless and until other players join hands with unless and until other players join hand with France. France alone will not be in a position to challenge Germany if other players do not support France in this effort. And that is why Bismarck is keen on entering into alliances with other European powers except Britain and France. Because Britain is a challenger. France will not be a challenge if nobody else joins hands with France. And Britain and France are less likely to join hands. Why? Because of the Anglo-French rivalry. Right? So the English and the French are less likely to join hands. So they are not going to join hands. So I should not worry about that. What I should worry about is probably France joining hands with other players like Austria, with other players like Russia. If that is not happening, then France is not going to be a challenge. And my only challenge is going to be Britain. Okay? So to firstly address the French challenge, what he's doing is that he's entering into a number of secret alliances with other countries. Firstly, he enters into this alliance with Austria. The first thing that he does is that during the after 1871, during the 1870s, the first focus is Austria, and he tries to establish friendly relations with Austria. And to pursue friendly relations with Austria, he gets into a mutual guarantee, or he gets into a secret alliance with Austria, which was to assure a military guarantee that if at all Austria is attacked by any external player, Germany would support it, and vice versa. So this was the reinsurance treaty. It was a secret reinsurance treaty where both attempted to reinsure each other. Germany was to reassure Austria, and Austria was to reassure Germany that they would come to each other's rescue in case of any major attack or in case of any major external aggression. The next thing that Germany is focusing upon is Russia, which is another major neighbor of Germany and whose neutrality is crucial so as to ensure that Russia does not join hands with France. Now, to ensure that Russia does not join hands with France, he enters into a secret treaty now in 1887 with Russia. In 1887, he enters into a secret treaty with Russia, which is to ensure what? Which is to ensure that, again, Russia does not join hands with France. Okay. So, what you see is that the aim of Bismarck's policy, firstly, the aim of Bismarck's policy, firstly, is to isolate France, okay, and ensure that France does not join hands with anybody against Germany, okay. So, firstly, he signs a secret treaty with Austria, then he signs a secret treaty with Russia. And what is important is that he is pursuing no expansion in Europe from 1870s to 1890s. Even though in continental Europe, by the expenditure on military is something that continues unabated even after 1870s. After 1870s also, they continue to spend on their military, and the military might of Germany continues to expand after 1870s also. And on the one hand, he is pursuing increased military expenditures. On the other hand, he is pursuing a number of alliances to isolate France. Both were to ensure what? That France does not become a challenge. Another aim of pursuing this peace was why? Because if there is peace, Germany would be able to capture these markets. If there is peace, then German industries would be able to capture the markets in Austria, in Russia, because Russia was yet to undergo an industrial revolution. Okay, so Germany could easily capture markets in these areas if at all there was peace. If there was war, the German industries could not capture, or would not be in a position to capture these areas. So again, relative peace was being pursued so as to ensure what? That German industries could capture the European market. And by 1890s, you see that that Germany is almost had the equal market share to Britain in Europe. So his plan was working. Okay. At the same point of time, you see that obviously Britain is not a part of these treaties, and Germany also has already this thing coming into position. Also, what is happening is that by this time, we have not talked about Italian unification, but Bismarck was supportive of Italian unification. In fact, he handed over some of the Italian-speaking areas under Austrian control to Italy. So even with Italy, he shared relatively good relations. And you see that even with Italy, he has good relations. And so what is he able to do? He's able to impose a number of alliances and imposed an alliance system in Europe which was aimed at isolating France. Okay. And this is what is Bismarck's foreign policy. Okay. This is Bismarck's foreign policy, which had two objectives: to isolate France and to challenge Britain. And again, to challenge Britain, the emphasis was on military, and also the emphasis was on the German Navy, because British naval strength was far superior to any other. And you see that he is even pursuing a the naval expenditure also increases at this time. And by 1890s, the German Navy is second only to the British Navy in Europe. Okay. So by 1890s, he is able to achieve a lot. In 20 years, Germany is able to achieve a lot. But by 1890s, what you see, that this secret alliance system that he had imposed was this alliance system. These alliances were not open alliances. They were only secret alliances. And Bismarck had a history of doing secretly things which he may or may not uphold. Okay. So even though countries were entering, or even though other powers were entering into these alliances with Germany, not everybody was very sure about German intentions. Because on the one side, Germany was talking peace. On the other side, Germany was increasing its military expenditures. So not everyone was sure of how long these alliances would last, or if a time of conflict was to come, whether Germany and Bismarck were to honor these alliances or not. Okay. So his emphasis on military expenditures, his emphasis on pursuing secret alliances actually fueled an atmosphere of insecurity in the whole Europe at this point of time. But nonetheless, somehow the system survived. In 1890, Kaiser William I, by 1890, Kaiser William I, in 1888 itself actually, but more so by 1890, Kaiser William I is being replaced by Kaiser William II. And William II is of the opinion that why to pursue peace? When we are the longest, when we are the biggest economy in continental Europe, when we are such a big military power, why do we need peace? Why do we need these alliances? Let's show the world who we are. Okay? And so you see that 1890s onwards, Germany is pursuing colonies. And these colonies it's pursuing in Africa, North Africa. Okay? And also, apart from Africa also, Germany is in favor. Now Kaiser William II is no longer in favor of upholding a status quo, but is in favor of pursuing an expansion. But Bismarck is not. Bismarck is keenly in favor of continuing with these alliances and not send any dangerous signals to Germany's neighbors. But Kaiser William II is in favor of pursuing expansion. And at this point of time, Bismarck resigns. Bismarck resigns primarily because he is not in favor of any expansion. And you see that Kaiser William II is also okay. He says, you resign, so resign. I will pursue expansion after this anyways. And as soon as Bismarck resigns, all these secret alliances started to fall apart. Because Bismarck was the key architect of these alliance systems, and Bismarck was widely known as the architect of the German foreign policy at this time. As soon as Bismarck resigns, the first alliance that falls is the alliance between Germany and Russia, because the secret treaty which had been signed in 1887 was for a 3-year period, okay, which was to be renewed. And Kaiser William II refused to renew the treaty, and Bismarck was in favor of renewing the treaty, and this is what led to Bismarck resigning and Kaiser William II not renewing the treaty. As soon as Kaiser William II declined to renew the treaty and Bismarck resigned in protest, it was all clear to Europe that this is the beginning of German aggression. And so as soon as Bismarck resigned and this German-Russian alliance fell apart, you see that by 1894, now wary of a German aggression and trying to understand what caused Germany to not renew. If Germany is not renewing the reinsurance treaty with Russia, that means that Germany has aggressive aims, right? That is why it is not renewing the reinsurance treaty with Russia. And if it is not renewing the treaty with Russia, Russia must enter into a treaty with someone which is looking to contain Germany. And France was looking since 1870s to take a revenge. So now France and Russia enter into a treaty in 1894. France and Russia enter into a treaty in 1894. We will see in the next lecture that in 1904, So in 1894, France and Russia enter into a treaty. In 1904, Britain and France enter into a secret treaty. And once Britain and France are in a treaty and France and Russia are in a treaty, then obviously you would have Britain and France and Russia in a common treaty. Why? To isolate Germany. Okay. So you see that this is what happens by 1907. So the secret alliance system that Bismarck had managed to put in place and continue for 20 years till 1890 completely collapsed by 1907, where you see a opposite alliance coming into place, which was aimed at isolating Germany. So as long as Bismarck was there, his foreign policy actually managed to achieve German domination over Europe. But Bismarck's foreign policy also had other impacts, that it created an atmosphere of fear and insecurity in Europe. It imposed a secret alliance system in Europe, which created this atmosphere of fear and insecurity. And Bismarck's policies continued a militarization in Germany. And while Germany was pursuing this increasing military expenditures, other countries were not sitting silently. They also were pursuing increased military expenditures. So you see, by 1890s, all countries in Europe were increasing military expenditures, and they were entering into secret alliances. So it was Bismarck's policies which brought about a militarization of Germany, and which constantly provoked a militarization of Europe. Okay, and though he managed to put in a secret